be responsible or able to respond for it. And really that's the focus of my work, is to show people the tools, the tactics, and the actions that they could take, little simple things like their daily routines or how they approach studying or the environment or the foods that they eat, to really optimize their greatest asset, and their children's greatest asset, which is found between their ears, which is their brain. Because right now, children, yourself, it's kind of fast. We live in this very fast-paced world where really we have autonomous electric cars and spaceships that are being built to go to Mars. But when it comes to learning, our vehicle of choice for education is like a horse and buggy. And I don't mean that as a slight against teachers. My mother became a special education teacher because she didn't know how to help me with all my struggles growing up as a child. But it's more of a system issue. They say if Rip Van Winkle, he's the guy that slept for decades, if he woke up today, the only thing he would recognize are our schools. And it's really a systemic issue because our world has evolved so quickly. We live in this digital age where you have these digital supervillains like digital overload and digital distraction, a new term called digital dementia, where we're so absent-minded right now because our mind is like a muscle. It grows stronger with use, but we're so dependent on our smart devices, so we can't even remember a simple phone number anymore. You remember growing up, you and I, we used to know like how many phone numbers, like all these phone numbers, but how many phone numbers do we remember now? Right? Maybe one or two or three. And it's not that I want to memorize hundreds of phone numbers, but we've lost the ability just to remember one, or a simple passcode, or a simple conversation we had with somebody, or the number, our room number, or something, someone we just met. And I think memory lapses for your children, for yourself, two of the most costly words are I forgot. I forgot to do it. I forgot to bring it. I forgot that meeting. I forgot that conversation. I forgot that name. And so, we live in this digital world, but if you're struggling right now or your kids are struggling, it's not your fault. It's just we weren't prepared. They say that the average graduate right now, somebody graduating school is going to have anywhere from 8 to 14 different careers, I read recently. I mean, that's crazy. It's not different jobs, different careers, because the world is changing so rapidly. And in a world of rapid change, the most important skill to have, in my opinion, is your ability to learn just as fast. It's just we weren't taught how to do that. And so my message to everyone who's listening is that your children, your intelligence is not fixed. It's fluid. That, that standardized tests do a suboptimal job of your IQ, saying it's fixed from the age of 5 or 6 to whatever. That's not true, because we know that it could grow, because I could teach anybody listening to this on how to do better on that, because they're just strategies. And then I would also say there's no such thing as a good or bad student, or a good or bad memory, or good or bad focus. There's just a trained student and an untrained student. It's just we weren't taught how to do these things. So one of the ways of overcoming is to take these nouns and turn them into verbs, and it gives you the power to be able to affect positive change.
I think that's such a brilliant tip. And I hear you say that about trained students and untrained students. And I look back and realize I was such a good trained student. That was my forte. I could do school. I could do tests. I aced the ACT and the SAT. And it turns out that's actually like a completely worthless life skill. And that doing really well on those tests doesn't serve anyone else. It doesn't help you necessarily in life. It's a metric, and I basically learned how to take tests well. And that's one of my frustrations now as a parent and as a homeschooling mom, is that I feel like we're in an education system that was designed for a different age, but yet our children are the ones who are suffering with this because we're not giving them the tools they're going to need. Like you said, they're going to have multiple careers. And on top of that, we need children and who become adults who can think outside the box and connect the dots and solve some really big problems, because our kids are going to face some doozies as adults. So I'm curious if you have any tips. Let's see how I can phrase this question. Maybe two-part. First of all, how do we maintain that love of learning in our children and kind of teach them from an early age what you learned older in life to love learning and to be able to learn quickly? But also for those of us who homeschool, is there a way that we can adapt even how we're teaching to really cater to that more easily?
Yeah, well, I know you and I could geek out about this for hours in terms of people stepping into the best version of themselves. And so let's deconstruct this a little bit. I would say that I honor what you're saying about kids, in this world and not being prepared and not teaching them how to be creative or to solve problems. Right now, just a sign of the times, everything right now, in terms of jobs is moving in a certain direction. They call them the three A's. A is artificial intelligence. So more jobs are being taken by computers that could do a similar job through artificial intelligence. Also, the second A is automation, right? Because assembly line, just like we had assembly line education, we have everything being automated online also for people, and that's taking away careers and opportunities. The third A is Asia, which really signifies that things are being outsourced overseas. And so these jobs are available overseas for a fraction of the cost. So what can't be outsourced to a computer? Well, I would say three of the superpowers you really want to encourage with kids are creativity, right? The idea, your ability to transcend traditional ideas and rules and patterns and relationships or the like, to be able to create meaningful new ideas, forms, interpretations, methods, because the computer is not going to be able to do that anytime soon. The second superpower I would say to encourage with children is this superpower of imagination. We do an annual event um, it's really interesting where our audience is as almost as interesting as the people who are on stage. We have like the founder of WordPress, and I remember we had Quincy Jones in our last sitting in the audience. We had Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the Four Agreements, one of my very very favorite books of all time. And I remember pulling Don Miguel Ruiz on stage, and I said, what's your superpower? And he looked at the audience and he says, my superpower is like everybody's superpower here. It's the superpower of imagination. Because really, knowledge is what is, but imagination is what could be. This ability to form mental images and concepts that's not actually present in our senses. I would say that ability to take the invisible of what's in a child's mind or an inventor's mind or an author's mind and make it visible is really leadership, is taking the invisible and making it visible. And so creativity, imagination, and I would say a third area to focus on with children to really prepare them to live their best life is, yes, you want them to be creative. Yes, you want them to harness their imagination, which is like a muscle. And their strategies for all these is really that third thing I just said is strategy, a plan for success. I believe that when you see somebody successful, that genius leaves clues, meaning that if somebody is successful in music or in art or in some physical form, or they're a great accountant, or they have great relationships, they're great with finances, then they're doing certain things, that there's always a method behind the magic. When people see me on stage memorize names or the words or numbers, or they know I read a book a day or whatever, I always tell people genius is learned. It completely is. There's always a method behind the magic. When you see somebody pick up a musical instrument faster, or you see a child be able to focus, they're doing certain things that other people aren't, and it looks like magic. It's just we weren't taught how to do that. And so I would say those are three superpowers. In terms of children falling in love, with learning, it's so interesting. Children, I'm very concerned with the world we live in. I have a video just came out just like a month ago, and we have over 31 million views, and it's just me and my friend Simon Sinek talking about the dangers of some of the social media, where social media depression and distraction and these things, these forces, these supervillains. We're talking about superheroes and superpowers, but these are the supervillains that are holding us back in a lot of ways. Being reactive, picking up our phone the first thing in the morning when we really should be focused, instead of reacting to the world and fighting fires, we should be creating a vision for our life. And these dopamine hits that we get, out where with every like and comment and share and cat video that we watch, it's training us, it's rewiring our brain for distraction. And so I would say with children, one of the important things is, if you want to boost their self-esteem, teach them about their own brains. I mean, you can improve their self-esteem overnight, just understanding how their brain works. because it's like the most magnificent device on the planet, in the whole universe, right? But it's not user friendly. It doesn't come with an owner's manual. And so that's why we do these videos and we do our podcast, because we want to educate people about how they work so they could have that confidence and that self-esteem. But the other thing I would say is help people fall in love with learning is to bring joy and fun into, back into education. And I know this is a priority for you, and it's a focus with you when you're working with your children. I feel like that, and I know you do a lot of the wellness you talk about is about optimal health and anti-aging. And even because I follow your work so much. I have like my Viome test here. I have on my desk my Nano V and everything. I use all these resources, and those are so important. And I would say is people think, for example, children are the fastest learners on the planet, which they are, right? They can pick up a musical instrument, they can pick up languages faster, and one of the reasons why is they play. But when I say this to audiences, they often say, "Oh no, I stopped playing because I grew older." But I don't actually think that's accurate. I don't think you stopped playing because you grew older. I think it's the opposite. I think you grew older because you stopped playing. And I feel like that at some point in our life, maybe when as children, it was like, oh, I want to go out and play, or I'm going to, or they ask their friends like, hey, do you want to go out and play? But later on, it's like, oh, do you want to go hang out? And we start changing that language. But I feel like when we're playing in a natural state, when we have that sense of wonder, and when do we ever feel those feelings? I believe all learning is state dependent. All learning is state dependent. That if you want to know one of the keys to having a long-term memory, information itself is very boring. It's forgettable. But information tied to emotion becomes a long-term memory. Because we all know this, right, from personal experience. There could be a song that could take you back to when you're a kid. There could be a food that takes you back to when you're a child. There could be a fragrance that could take you back to when you're a child. Because information is forgettable, but information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. So all learning is state dependent. And so that's why I love play, because in that state of wonder, right, one of my favorite poets, Rumi, has this quote that said, "Sell your cleverness for bewilderment." Sell your cleverness for bewilderment. I mean, when's the last time you felt bewildered about something, or curious about something, or fascinated? It's just like children are so engaged with the process, and they're not afraid to fail. Even children, as you watch them learning how to walk, they don't ever, they don't try like 3 times and like, oh, I failed at this, I'm never going to try this again, right? That would be ludicrous. But adults do this all the time. Adults will take a dance class, or they'll take a voice class, or they'll take a programming coding class, and they're not good at it at first, and they'll be like, oh, they don't want to look bad, and they're always concerned about everyone else's opinions and their expectations. And here's the thing: if you can go broke buying into the opinions and expectations of others. I was working years ago with Jim Carrey. I help a lot of actors speed read scripts, have better focus on set, remember their lines in a fraction of the time. And I remember we were in his kitchen. We're making guacamole. And I was just like, Jim, why do you do what you do? What drives you? And he's like, Jim, the reason why I played all these characters and they're very extreme and I act like a fool is because I want to give people permission to be themselves. And he's like, his mission really is to free people from the concerns of others so they could really be themselves. And I feel like as adults, and I don't mean when growing older, I don't really mean chronological age. I mean the age of our minds, the age of our hearts, the age of our spirits, if you will. Like, I know somebody who just turned 95 years old, and he's like the youngest, oldest person, and he still goes to work Monday through Friday, and he loves telling stories because that's his job, and he learns so quickly because it's a mindset, right? But I also know somebody who's 9 years old, and he's going on like 59, and he's so and this child's 9, but he's so old, right? So it's really a mindset. So I would say integrating play and experimentation in our learning, taking things, because everybody has different learning styles. We talked about that it's not how smart somebody is, but it's really how are they smart. That if I asked everybody here to write their names on a piece of paper, and you could do this with your children, You write your first and last name. And then I ask you to switch hands, and with your opposite hand, right below it, your first